The leaders of the G7 nations will regather for day 2 of their summit in Hiroshima, Japan. On day 1, the leaders had decided to stiffen sanctions against Russia. They also say they need to reduce reliance on trade with China. An early version of the draft communique, which will be issued after the talks, said the goal was not to harm or hinder China's economic progress, calling for constructive talks with Beijing. But the draft called for reducing excessive dependencies in critical supply chains. Reacting to this, China's embassy in Japan said it is gravely concerned about recent signs of negative China-related moves at the G7 summit and urges Japan not to turn it into a political show against or to curb China. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who was invited by Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, arrived in Hiroshima on Friday evening. The leaders held delegation-level talks on the sidelines of the summit. Today, the Indian Prime Minister also held bilateral talks with leaders from Japan, South Korea and Vietnam on the sidelines of the Hiroshima G7 summit. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is set to join the group later today. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Zelensky are set to hold talks again later today. This will be the first time the two leaders are meeting in person since Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022. Meanwhile, the G7 leaders also said they ensured Ukraine had the budget support it needs for this year and early 2024. In a statement issued on Friday, the G7 leaders said, "We are taking new steps to ensure that Russia's illegal aggression against the sovereign state of Ukraine fails and to support the Ukrainian people in their quest for a just peace rooted in respect for international law." To this end, the US, UK and Canada hit Russia with a fresh set of sanctions. The US Treasury Department sanctioned 22 people and 104 entities. It includes a Liechtenstein-based Russian intelligence services procurement network and a Netherlands-based procurement agent. The US State Department sanctioned almost 200 individuals, entities, vessels and aircraft. The sanctions have also been imposed on an international network. It procures components for the manufacturing of the Orlan drone. Russian forces and their proxies are using the Orlan drone in Ukraine. The United Kingdom announced a new wave of sanctions against Russia. This targets companies connected to the alleged theft of Ukrainian grain. This includes 86 so-called shady individuals and entities connected to the theft and resale of Ukrainian grain. Britain also published plans to ban imports of Russian diamonds, copper, aluminium and nickel. Canada announced sanctions on 17 individuals and 18 entities linked to Russian companies that provide military technology. Canada also sanctioned 30 individuals and 8 entities involved in Russia's ongoing human rights violations.
The most important thing we can do right now for global peace and security is to support Ukraine in its struggle against Russia, but also to ensure that Russia pays a price for its illegal and unprovoked act of aggression. That's why we've announced new sanctions today. My message to Putin is straightforward, and we're not going away. Russia has conducted an illegal, unprovoked act of aggression by invading Ukraine, and Russia needs to know that we and other countries remain steadfast in our resolve to support Ukraine.
Meanwhile, spouses of the leaders of the G7 participated in a symposium on Friday. They discussed peace issues with young people in Hiroshima.
You show the world that change can happen, that young people can make it happen. The future is not a far away finish line. We are building it every single day. Raise your voice, hold on to your dreams, and let's create a better, freer, more peaceful world.
Let's now go live to Hiroshima, Japan. Our principal diplomatic correspondent, Sidhan Sibol, is standing by live. Sidhan Sibol, good to see you. What has happened so far today?
Well, so far the G7 leaders have met. We have seen those visuals, those family photo pictures. This is the second time they have sat together in last 24 hours to discuss global issues. But there has been an overwhelming shadow of Russia-Ukraine conflict. We know that fresh set of sanctions are expected to be announced by the G7 countries by tomorrow when the joint statement is released. There is an increased worry about China as well, given the fact that how the Chinese aggressiveness has been a worry in this part of the world. Now, we know that the Japanese foreign ministry spokesperson, when she spoke to WION, she particularly said that what is happening in Ukraine, what's happening when it comes to the ongoing conflict in Europe, could happen in Asia as well. And that is the big worry for countries like India, who have been facing the Chinese aggressive actions at their border. So essentially that has been the focus since morning when it comes to the G7 meetings. But later in the day, the outreach summit begins, which will see participation of the 8 invited member countries, including India, Australia and Indonesia.
Probably you can tell us more about the attendance of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. What's the mood in Hiroshima, Japan, ahead of Zelensky giving his speech probably to the leaders and the delegates who are gathered in this summit?
Well, one of the big stories which has emerged from Hiroshima is the presence of the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. We know the Japanese side has confirmed that there will be an in-person participation of the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky here in the city. And essentially, there have been two aspects to it. One, of course, he will be reaching out to the G7 grouping, hoping to get more support amidst the ongoing conflict with Russia, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And that has been a worry factor. That has something that has united the G7 grouping as well. The second is the reach out he's expected to make when it comes to the invited countries, many of which are major countries in the global south: India, Indonesia, Vietnam, Comoros representing the African Union, the Cook Islands representing the Pacific Islands. So he gets ample of opportunity to meet with countries. He's not able to have full-fledged in-person conversations so far. As you pointed out, this is the first in-person meeting between the Indian Prime Minister and the Ukrainian President Zelensky. So Zelensky will be keen that the Indian side invites Ukraine to address the G20 summit that takes place in the month of September in New Delhi.
Live from Hiroshima, Japan, our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibol. See you later.